Jim, you and I both make our living in the realm of ideas. We're both writers. I've been a teacher. You review books and market them, as well as writing quite a few. The question arises, what is an idea? What is this product that we work with and sell that's clearly important, but at the same time it's a little bit amorphous. It's not like steel or even like a service like computing. I think it'd be interesting to talk about what is an idea.
Well, an idea is, among other things, a thought which guides human action. If we have a high self-esteem or a high thought about ourselves, we are more likely to be friendly, outgoing, to be striving toward what we want, for example. Ideas certainly include inventions, business ideas, as well as all the things that we associate with the arts.
That's interesting. You mentioned the effects of an idea on an individual. Clearly, if you read any psychology at all, you see that people who are happy and successful tend to have a certain set of ideas about the possibility of success and what it means if they fail, and so forth. What about in the political and cultural realm? Is this the same kind of psychological role for ideas there?
Well, I think many of the ideas that dominate our lives or that dominate history are often unspoken assumptions. For example, during the 19th century, classical liberalism, ideas of limited government dominated, and so when countries came on the world stage like Japan, they liberalized and opened up, not because that was their original thought or deliberate choice, but that's what everybody else was doing, and it appeared to be successful. And in the same way, in more recent times, we've seen countries like India, nations in Africa adopt protectionist policies, big government, welfare, the whole thing, not because they dreamed that up, but because they could see that's what almost everybody else was doing. Those were the dominant ideas of the age.
Well, certainly if you look at this century, in a way it's been the century of ideas, big ideas. Socialism was perhaps the biggest of them. It was almost entirely an intellectual movement and guiding force that led to the Russian Revolution and created the communist state, and then now we've seen that idea played out. And when people talk about socialism being dead, what they mean is not necessarily that every socialist economy has collapsed, although most of them have, but that the ideal has disappeared. People are no longer drawn to it.
I absolutely agree with you that the implicit assumptions have an enormous influence. And I think you're right that one of the dominating thoughts of the age is that for anything to be moral, noble, worthy of approval, it has to have come from good intentions, and that a system cannot really be worthy unless people are intending to do good. And at the very least, one might start with a look at results. That if you look at the marketplace, you see that, first of all, markets have always been, for thousands of years, the most peaceful places on earth. It has been the opposite of warfare. Merchants cannot thrive if their customers are broke. It's never in the self-interest of merchants to kill their customers. It's never in the self-interest of merchants to kill their suppliers. So marketplaces, merchants, commerce promotes peace, and always has, and has always been the opposite of war. It has always been merchants which crossed borders, and regions of Europe, for example, that were at war. It was merchants who were going back and forth, Jewish merchants, Chinese merchants, Armenian merchants, Italian merchants, and many others. It has always been commerce, profit-seeking commerce, which has created wealth, sources of knowledge, independent of government, and which have been absolutely crucial in securing human freedom, not only in the Western world, but in other places where it has developed. It has always been marketplaces which have created very powerful incentives for more moral behavior. Whatever the intentions are, individuals seeking their own self-interest, and yet practically every fortune that you can name, whether you're talking about John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J. Paul Getty, Bill Gates of Microsoft, anybody you care to name, all of those fortunes were based on repeat business. It is very expensive to bring in a new customer. The cost of salesmen, the cost of telephones, the cost of office space, all the things that you have, advertising, all the things you have to do to bring in a new customer. It's a lot cheaper to keep existing people happy. And so in order to make a fortune, you have to keep people happy. You have to treat them honestly, which is why it's impossible to have a mail order business or almost any other retail store without a money back guarantee. It's not necessarily through their goodwill. They have to keep people happy because it's a lot easier to keep existing customers happy. And you do that by offering value for money, by treating people honestly, by treating people with respect. These are the incentives of the marketplace. And so the results are peace, freedom, and moral behavior. They are not necessarily coming from altruistic motives. There is an element of that sometimes, but the primary driver, the most reliable force in history is self-interest, and it leads to the very fabric of our civilization. I would say that a decent civilization is impossible without markets. And indeed, civilization originated along trade routes, and as all the cultural centers that you might think of, from Florence and Paris and London and New York and all the rest, have all started as commercial centers, and they remain commercial centers. And if they become government centers, primarily a capital, they tend to atrophy. If they are cut off from outside markets, they tend to atrophy and decline. So that if we put aside this dominating assumption of that something has to be good intentions in order to be decent, and we simply look at the results, that's one way of doing it. We can see that this idea that has dominated our age of good intentions are the criteria of what is decent and honorable, that is entirely wrong.